This week on the Retirement Quick Tips podcast, I'm ranking the worst investments for retirees. These are the investments that I don't like, I don't recommend, and mostly it's because after 17 years of being a financial advisor working with clients, I've seen them backfire, and in some cases, they can ruin someone's retirement. And today I want to talk about high yield bonds, but more generally, high yield anything. So yield is income. So think of yield as income. So like you invest $100,000 and it's promising you a 10% yield every year. That means on that $100,000 investment, you're going to get $10,000 of income in a given year. That sounds pretty darn sweet, except most of the time that yield equals risk because there's a reason why, especially in a lower interest rate environment. Like right now, interest rates are higher, but what do you see out there that's 10% yield or 10% income? That's still a very high yield or rate given the current interest rate environment. So it's important to be aware of like, well, what's the going rate? And is this much higher than that? And if so, you got to ask why, because there's a reason. I think the simplest example, but you can apply it to pretty much any investment that's promising a really high income stream, is if we just look at high yield bonds specifically. So these are commonly referred to or known as junk bonds. And it's a bond issued by companies that have a lower credit rating compared to investment grade bonds, which are companies like higher credit rating, higher quality financials, et cetera, less likely to default. So the lower credit rating means that that company, the junk bond, the high yield bond, it has a higher chance of default and bankruptcy, higher chance that the interest payments are going to stop coming. And then that nice 10% yield is just, the music's going to stop playing. And worse, you could lose your entire investment in the situation of a bankruptcy. Buying junk bonds is basically like loaning money to someone with a 500 credit score. Odds are decent that they are going to pay you late. They're going to get behind. You're not going to get your money back. Those interest payments are going to stop. So the main thing to look out here for more broadly, and why I don't like anything with an excessive high yield or high income, now it's not just bonds, but other investments that pay dividends too, is that the high yield is there to compensate you for the additional risk you're taking in owning that lower quality investment. There's no way around that. You have to reward somebody with a higher yield because they're not going to buy otherwise. They're not going to take on the risk. So the yield matches the risk. And that makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because it's like, okay, well, if I'm loaning money to someone who I'm not sure is going to pay me back, you're going to have to pay me a much higher interest rate. And that's true with credit worthiness of typical borrowers all the time. It's like why certain people have higher rates on car loans and other types of investments if they have a lower credit score, because the likelihood that they're going to pay back is less. So the company loaning the money needs to compensate for that. Now, just an example here, let's say the going rate for a 5-year CD or treasury or some sort of investment grade bond, right now, that's in the range of 4%. So that's kind of the comparison baseline where you could say, okay, that's the going rate right now for a high quality 5-year bond or note. Let's say, though, that you come across a 5-year high yield investment, and that's paying 8% or 9%. So there's a reason that that's double the typical rate offered. So you need to understand the risk. Why is it risky? What about it makes it risky? Why is it paying so much higher yield than what the market is offering for similar or higher quality investments and bonds? Most people invest because they get sucked into that income. It's just a mouth-watering yield and they cannot resist. But then you fast forward a couple of years and those income payments stop. They can't get their money back. And that's why they're garbage. There are actually thousands of companies in the United States that are considered zombie companies. If you haven't heard of this term, it's basically companies that have no hope. They aren't profitable. They really cannot even generate enough profit to cover their debt payments. So what they do is they get by on taking new loans and they rely on continued financial support to pay off the old loans. I mean, it's a vicious cycle. And with interest rates higher than they've been, and if they stay higher, I think we're going to see a lot more defaults of these zombie companies. There are estimates that suggest that about 2,000 zombie companies in the US right now that are publicly traded. These are not privately owned business. If you throw in those, the number is probably 10 times that amount. But these are companies you can buy their stock. They issue bonds, they issue debt. They have issued stock that you can buy. They're large enough to have gone through the process of becoming a publicly traded company. And there are 2,000 of these zombie companies that have this like veil of, well, we're a big corporation, give us your money, and we're going to issue high yield debt, and it's going to pay you 10% for the next 5 years. But it's like, well, you better watch out because most of these companies, they're pretty much doomed. Eventually, the music is going to stop for them, and it's not going to be pretty. So these companies, they flat out shouldn't exist. They're a drag on the economy. And with interest rates remaining high and the economy possibly, I'm not saying it is, possibly on the verge of a downturn, like I said, I think you're going to hear more and more headlines about these companies filing for bankruptcy. And that's not going to be good for the people who own their debt and own their bonds. And I don't want that to be you. All right, bottom line, no matter what the investment, if the yield or the promised income is really, really good, it's too good to be true. You cannot resist. It's like, oh, I would love 8%, 9%, 10% yield. That sounds incredible. There's a good chance that at some point that investment is going to sour. Really good chance. So we don't want to lose our principal. We don't want that income to stop. And both of those are significant risks when you own high yield anything. All right, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Ashley Michike, and this is the Retirement Quick Tips Podcast.